Vijay Drakoi. I will speak now.
A good afternoon to you, traveler. I trust you haven't suffered too much in the heat of the day. Ah, you've been out in the forest again. Well, I suppose it must be cooler in there, beneath the shade of the trees. Might I inquire what business took you away from this fair market town, and off into the verdant wilds of the woods? Tracking bandits. Ah, yes, I remember you telling of bandits on your last visit here. I take it you've been assisting the town guard in the removal of those ruffians? Good to hear. But come in, come in. Come into my humble shop and sit down a while. I'm afraid the canvas roof and walls are hardly the equal of the forest canopy in terms of providing cool shade, but something is better than nothing. Should you care for a cold drink? I've just had a small keg of ice brought to me by the icemonger, and I have a jug of some wonderful elderberry wine that some jovial soul forgot here during the Midnight Madness Festival some nights back. Splendid. Were you in town for the Midnight Madness? I don't recall seeing you about the marketplace, but I did spend most of my time confined to my shop by a near constant flow of customers and curious townsfolk. Ah, right. You were out on the trail of those bandits. Well, it was quite the event. The dates for the festival are not precisely regular. In fact, I suspect that most of them are drawn randomly out of a bag. But regardless, it is a popular event with the locals. The Midnight Madness is a somewhat irregular festival that is celebrated in this region. It exists in other regions as well, though it is celebrated in slightly different ways depending on locality. Normally, the peasants of the region, as well as the townsfolk, do their shopping at various times during the day. But for this festival, most work is set aside during the day, and the people sleep and rest before coming out in droves after the sun goes down. All manner of lights are set up all around the marketplace, and in front of each of the tents and stalls and booths. Those merchants with access to such things contrive to light the insides of their shops with fairy lights, gnome lamps, foxfires, and the like, and the entire night is spent with the people wandering about the marketplace, buying all manner of things that they perhaps would not ordinarily purchase. The people of this region are a little more sedate in their shopping, even during the Midnight Madness, but I could tell you more than one strange tale of how it is observed in other lands. And speaking of far-off lands, traveler, I have heard recent news from a wandering skald that may amuse you. Far to the east of here, near the coasts of the Lakatan Ocean, is the kingdom city of Ariatra. Once it was a very powerful kingdom, with rich nobles and the largest army in those lands. There was not a barony or freehold on any of Ariatra's borders that did not acknowledge their sway. But in recent times, the king of Ariatra seems to have gone, well, rather mad. He went on long tirades against his advisors and ministers, accused many honest folk of everything from incompetence to treachery and treason, and generally behaved so monstrously that half of his court simply left the kingdom. To make matters worse, one day the king went on a drunken rampage through the town, setting fire to the midden heaps and eventually the entire city, castle and all. And while the fires roared to the sky and consumed everything, the king merely sat on his horse and sang some insane ballad about his own unimpeachable gravitas. Ariatra is now a deserted and desolate place, and the king sits alone amid the ashes of what he once ruled. Or so the scout gave me to understand. Some of it may be embellishment, of course, but I have also heard some of this tale from other traveling folk. One thing is certain, so far as I can tell. The king of Ariatra is no longer of much consequence. I am so glad of this iced wine. It is almost warm enough in here for a castle fire. Well, perhaps not that bad. But the weather this day is certainly warmer than most folk could wish. And sadly, I know no magic for making things colder, only for heating things up. Strangely enough, traveler, were I in my natural dragon form, I could quite enjoy this hot weather. Perhaps stretched out on some sun-bathed ledge high up in the mountains. But in this human form that I've adopted, the better to walk and work among these people, I find I don't much care for overly warm weather. During the warmer parts of the day, I prefer a simple pair of linen trousers such as these. They have a drawstring waist and plenty of loose fabric about the upper legs before gathering into a pair of tall black leather boots. A short tunic of fine cotton serves for the remainder of my garb, and a thread-trimmed leather belt holds all together and provides a place to hang a few pouches and other sundry items. Ah, traveler, here is a sight you should definitely see. Come to the door of my shop and behold a portion of the local legendary. See there, to the east, the procession of townsfolk who enter the square. They are all chanting together and holding cabbages over their heads. Watch them as they pass.
Praise the river! Praise the river! Praise the river! Praise the Cabbages! Praise the river! Praise the Cabbages! Praise the river! 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 Praise the
Why, yes, traveler, I am well aware that such a spectacle requires at least a brief explanation. I shall enlighten you. So the story goes. A few years back, there was a rather severe drought across this entire region. Crops were wilting in the fields, the rivers were low, the smaller streams dried up entirely, and game in the forest was hard enough to come by. So the townsfolk were not doing too well for food that summer, and it looked as though a very bleak autumn would follow if the crops failed. And then one morning, at the very height of the drought, some of the townsfolk were down at the river's edge, drawing up what little water they could for the parched fields, when they beheld a miracle. Around a bend in the riverbed, floating downstream towards the astonished folk, was a massive flotilla of cabbages. In short order, the entire river was awash in cabbages, a seemingly endless flood of them bobbing and rolling down what was left of the drought-ravaged watercourse. Not so surprised that they took leave of their senses, the townsfolk proceeded to gather all the cabbages they could, eventually even bringing fishing nets and seines to help harvest the unexpected bounty of the river. And this miraculous flow of cabbages continued all day long, and into the evening. The people lit fires and made soup from the cabbages, and fried more of it and set to pickling some against the winter months. And for a few days the entire town ate little else but cabbage. And if their fields were wilting, At least their bellies were full for a change. And then, when no one in the entire town could stand another mouthful of cabbage soup, then it began to rain. There were frequent rains for the next month. Frequent, but not too heavy, and perfect for reviving the moisture-deprived fields of the region. The crops revived, and even thrived, and most of the townsfolk were inclined to attribute the rainfall and the breaking of the drought to the same miraculous power that sent all those cabbages floating down the stream. So, years later, the occurrence is still remembered, and though the mysterious source of the cabbages was never revealed, the river is now praised in local folklore, and the cabbage is revered as the most prized of foods. And every so often, a procession is held, such as we have just witnessed, to remind people of the unexpected bounty of the river, and of the nourishing and wholesome virtue of the cabbage. Even now, the folk are on their way to one of the open kitchens of the town to prepare a feast of cabbages for all to partake in. Come, traveler, let us follow after them. I shall seal up my shop, and we will go forth and join the locals, partaking in this feast of the miraculous cabbage.